Lightning splits the Montana sky as thunder rolls across Yellowstone Ranch. Inside the stone-walled great room, Victor Hawthorne stands frozen, his expensive suit splattered with crimson. At his feet lies his sister Lila, her blonde hair spread across the cold floor like spilled silk, blood pooling beneath her head where it struck the granite hearth. The storm outside cannot drown out the deafening silence that follows violence. Victor's hands shake as he stares down at the woman who once shared his childhood, his empire, his very DNA. The woman whose independence he could never control. The woman whose freedom had become his obsession. Some families kill for inheritance, others kill for love. But what happens when a billionaire chief executive officer's obsession with his sister becomes so twisted that blood spills across the floors of their Montana paradise? Tonight, you are going to witness a story that will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty, sibling rivalry, and the corrupting power of immense wealth. This is not just another tale of greed gone wrong. This is the chilling account of how love can mutate into something monstrous when left unchecked in the shadows of privilege. But before we dive deeper into this nightmare, I need you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt jealous of a sibling who seemed to get everything easier? That brother or sister who could charm your parents effortlessly while you struggled for approval? Do you know someone whose need for control destroyed their relationships? Someone who could not bear the thought of losing their grip on the people they claimed to love? Has wealth and success ever made someone in your life lose their humanity? Have you watched money transform a person from caring family member into something cold and calculating? If any of these questions hit close to home, then you understand the foundation upon which the Hawthorne tragedy was built. You understand how Victor Hawthorne, heir to billions and master of a corporate empire, could become so consumed with possessing his sister that he would rather see her dead than free. The toxic dynamic of the Hawthorne family is a masterclass in how love can become obsession, how success can breed destruction, and how the very wealth meant to protect a family can become the weapon that destroys it from within. Silas Hawthorne raised his children in competition rather than cooperation, believing rivalry would make them stronger. Instead, it planted seeds of resentment that would grow into something deadly. What you are about to learn will reveal exactly how this billion-dollar empire crumbled in a single night of violence, how years of psychological manipulation led to murder, and most importantly, what lessons we can extract from this devastating family collapse to protect ourselves and our loved ones from similar fates. If stories of family secrets and deadly obsessions fascinate you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed wealth corrupt a family? The Hawthorne name commanded respect in boardrooms from Manhattan to Tokyo. Built over 4 generations, their empire stretched across 3 industries that shaped modern America: oil extraction from the Texas Panhandle, cutting-edge technology patents that powered Silicon Valley, and luxury real estate developments that redefined city skylines from Los Angeles to Miami. At the center of this financial dynasty sat Silas Hawthorne, a man whose steel-gray eyes reflected the ruthless calculation that had multiplied his inherited millions into billions. Silas understood that empires were not built through kindness. They were forged through manipulation, strategic alliances, and the willingness to sacrifice anyone who stood in the way of expansion. This philosophy extended to his own children. Victor entered the world 5 years before Leela, arriving to fanfare and celebration as the heir apparent. From his first breath, expectations weighed upon his tiny shoulders like a custom-tailored suit of armor. Silas enrolled him in elite preparatory schools, where networking mattered more than learning, hired private tutors who taught him to see competitors as enemies, and surrounded him with adults who praised his intelligence while constantly reminding him that intelligence alone was worthless without results. Victor excelled because failure was not an option. His childhood bedroom walls displayed trophies from academic competitions, certificates from leadership camps, and photographs of him shaking hands with politicians and business leaders. But beneath the polished exterior, a deep insecurity took root. Every achievement felt hollow because it came with the knowledge that love was conditional upon performance. When Leela arrived, everything changed. Where Victor had to fight for every scrap of approval, Lila seemed to receive it naturally. Her laughter filled rooms that had grown silent under the weight of expectation. She possessed an effortless charm that drew people toward her like moths to flame, a quality that could not be taught or learned through expensive tutoring sessions. Silas noticed this difference immediately, and being the master manipulator he was, he decided to use it. During family dinners at their Connecticut estate, Silas would pose questions that pitted his children against each other. He would ask Victor to explain complex business concepts while praising Lila for her creative insights on the same topics. He would assign them competing projects during summer breaks, then reward the winner while criticizing the loser in front of staff and guests. The message was clear: there could only be one favorite, and that position had to be earned daily. Victor learned to resent the ease with which Lila navigated their father's approval. He began studying her interactions, taking notes on what made her laugh, memorizing the topics that sparked her interest. What started as sibling rivalry slowly transformed into something more intense. He wanted to understand her, to decode the secret of her natural magnetism, to possess the qualities that came so effortlessly to her. Their childhood home was a monument to luxury. Crystal chandeliers imported from Austria cast rainbow patterns across marble floors quarried in Italy. Original paintings by renowned artists lined hallways wide enough for vehicles to drive through. The estate employed 23 full-time staff members who maintained gardens that required professional landscaping teams to keep them perfect. Yet despite all this material abundance, both children went to bed hungry for something money could not purchase: unconditional parental love. The staff whispered about the tension during family gatherings. They noticed how Victor would watch Lila during conversations, his jaw tightening when their father laughed at her jokes. They observed how Lila would glance nervously at her brother when receiving praise, as if she understood that every compliment directed toward her felt like criticism to him. But here is what those crystal chandeliers and marble floors could not illuminate: emotional emptiness. Here is what those original masterpieces could not paint: genuine affection between family members. Here is what those perfectly manicured gardens could not grow: trust between siblings who should have been allies but were instead raised as adversaries. The Hawthorne children learned early that love was a limited resource, that attention was a prize to be won, and that family loyalty was secondary to individual achievement. These lessons would follow them into adulthood, where the stakes would become deadly and the consequences irreversible. By 28, Victor Hawthorne had achieved everything his father demanded. The board of directors unanimously voted him Chief Executive Officer of Hawthorne Industries, making him the youngest person ever to control a Fortune 500 company. Financial magazines featured him on their covers, calling him a visionary leader who understood how to merge traditional energy sectors with emerging technologies. But success tasted bitter when it came without the one thing Victor craved most: complete control over every aspect of his world. As Chief Executive Officer, Victor implemented management systems that bordered on surveillance. He required department heads to submit daily reports detailing not just project progress, but employee conversations, lunch companions, and after-work activities. Security cameras monitored every corner of corporate headquarters. Employee emails were automatically copied to Victor's private server for review. His executive assistant, Margaret Thompson, later testified that Victor would spend hours reading through these communications, searching for signs of disloyalty or conspiracy. He fired employees for minor infractions, believing that fear would breed compliance. The corporate culture became suffocating, with workers afraid to express opinions or form friendships that might be misinterpreted as plotting against leadership. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Paris, Leila had discovered something Victor could never understand: freedom. She rented a small apartment in Montmartre, where morning light streamed through tall windows onto canvases that captured her growing confidence as an artist. Gallery owners began displaying her work, critics praised her unique perspective, and for the first time in her life, Leila experienced relationships based on genuine affection rather than strategic calculation. Her Instagram account showed a woman transformed. Gone were the carefully posed photographs from family events, replaced by candid shots of her laughing with friends at sidewalk cafes, paint-stained fingers holding coffee cups, spontaneous adventures through European cities where nobody knew or cared about the Hawthorne fortune. Victor obsessively monitored these posts, analyzing every smile, every companion, every location. Each image of her happiness felt like personal betrayal. How dare she thrive without his permission? How dare she build a life he could not control? But Silas maintained one tradition that neither distance nor independence could break: the annual summer gathering at Yellowstone Ranch. Every July, Leila would reluctantly return to Montana, trading her Parisian freedom for 6 weeks of forced family time. The ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of pristine wilderness, where the Absaroka Mountains created a natural fortress around the main compound. Buffalo grazed in distant meadows while eagles circled overhead, but the natural beauty could not disguise the tension that settled over the property like morning fog. The ranch staff noticed how Lila would change during these visits. The vibrant woman from her social media posts became quiet, watchful, constantly glancing over her shoulder. She would take long walks alone, often not returning until after sunset, as if physical distance from the main house could provide emotional relief. Victor used these summers to intensify his surveillance. He installed tracking applications on her phone during family dinners, claiming he needed to ensure her safety during solo hikes. He hired private investigators to monitor her communications, telling himself he was protecting family interests. He assigned security personnel to follow her movements, justifying this as standard protocol for wealthy family members. The staff whispered about finding Victor, standing outside Lila's bedroom door at night, listening for phone conversations. They noticed how he would question them about her activities, offering cash rewards for information about her daily routines, her emotional state, her private thoughts shared during casual conversations. Ranch manager Robert Martinez later recalled feeling increasingly uncomfortable with these requests. Mr. Hawthorne wanted to know everything, Martinez testified: what time she woke up, what she ate for breakfast, who she talked to, what books she was reading. It felt wrong, but he was the boss. Victor convinced himself that his behavior was protective rather than invasive. In his mind, Lila needed guidance because she lacked his business acumen. She required monitoring because she was naive about people who might exploit her wealth. She deserved control because she was incapable of making responsible decisions independently. The psychological distance between them grew with each passing summer. The warning signs were all there. Drop a comment if you have ever seen someone's need for control escalate this dangerously in your own life. June 22nd, 2022. The date would forever mark the beginning of the end for the Hawthorne dynasty. Silas Hawthorne, now 83 years old and showing the first signs of cognitive decline, made an announcement that shattered Victor's carefully constructed world. During a conference call with the family's legal team, attended by both his children, Silas declared his intention to step down as chairman of Hawthorne Industries within 6 months. But the bombshell that followed left Victor speechless. "I have decided to divide the family assets equally between Victor and Lila," Silas stated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Both my children have proven themselves worthy of inheriting our legacy, albeit in different ways." Victor's face drained of color as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. Equal inheritance meant losing majority control. Equal inheritance meant Lila could challenge his decisions. Equal inheritance meant his lifelong assumption of being the sole heir was nothing more than a delusion. The 2022 summer gathering felt different from the moment Victor arrived at the ranch. The staff noticed his shortened temper, his constant phone calls to lawyers and financial advisors, his habit of pacing the main house like a caged predator. He demanded detailed schedules of Lila's activities, installed additional security cameras in common areas, and hired 3 new surveillance specialists under the guise of enhanced property protection. Lila arrived 2 weeks later, and her unease was immediately apparent. She had grown thinner during her months in Paris, her usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous glances and hesitant conversations. During her first dinner at the ranch, she barely touched her food, frequently checking her phone as if expecting important news that might provide an escape route. Victor noticed everything. He observed how she flinched when he entered rooms unexpectedly. He catalogued her shortened responses to his questions. He documented her early bedtimes and extended morning walks, interpreting these behaviors as evidence of guilty conscience rather than fear. His surveillance escalated beyond anything previously attempted. Victor accessed Lila's bank records, discovering she had been quietly moving money into accounts their father could not monitor. He intercepted her mail, finding correspondence with legal firms in both Paris and New York. He hired specialists to decode her encrypted communications, convinced she was building a case against him. The truth was simpler and more heartbreaking. Lila was planning her permanent escape from the family. The inheritance announcement had terrified her because it meant Victor would never allow her to leave peacefully. She was consulting lawyers not to steal his birthright, but to legally separate herself from Hawthorne Industries entirely. But Victor's paranoia had reached levels where reality became indistinguishable from delusion. Every phone call she made was plotting, every smile was manipulation, every attempt at normal conversation was psychological warfare designed to lower his defenses. Silas, meanwhile, seemed to relish the tension between his children. During family meetings about business transition, he would pose questions that forced them to take opposing positions. He would share confidential information with one sibling while excluding the other, then act surprised when conflicts arose. At 83, he remained the master manipulator, pulling strings that made his children dance to his destructive rhythm. The Montana weather began reflecting the family's emotional climate. July brought unusual atmospheric pressure, with meteorologists predicting severe thunderstorms throughout the region. The normally crystalline mountain air became heavy and oppressive. Wildlife grew restless, with ranch hands reporting that horses refused to graze in their usual pastures, and cattle huddled together as if sensing approaching danger. On July 28th, Silas announced that he wanted to host a celebration dinner to commemorate his retirement decision. The meal would be prepared by the ranch's chef, served in the great room where family portraits lined the walls, and attended only by the 3 remaining Hawthorns. Victor spent the afternoon of July 28th reviewing surveillance footage, convinced that Layla was planning something during the dinner. Layla spent those same hours on the phone with her lawyer in Paris, begging him to expedite paperwork that would allow her to renounce her inheritance and disappear forever. Neither sibling realized that Silas had orchestrated this dinner with a specific purpose, to force a final confrontation that would determine which child truly deserved to control the family empire. As evening approached, dark clouds massed over the Absaroka Mountains. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning began dancing across the horizon. The storm that would witness murder was gathering strength, and inside the ranch house, 3 members of one of America's wealthiest families prepared for a dinner that would end in blood. July 28th, 2022, 8 o'clock in the evening. The great room of Yellowstone Ranch was set for what Silas called a celebration, but the atmosphere felt more like a trial. 3 place settings adorned the massive oak table, each positioned to maximize psychological discomfort. Silas sat at the head, Victor to his right, Lila to his left, with enough distance between the siblings to prevent casual conversation. Lightning illuminated the room through floor-to-ceiling windows as the storm intensified outside. Thunder rolled across the mountains, growing closer with each rumble. The chef had prepared prime ribeye steaks, but none of the 3 family members showed any appetite for the meal before them. Silas began the evening with a toast. "To the future of Hawthorne Industries," he announced, raising his glass of aged whiskey. "May it prosper under the guidance of both my children." Victor's grip on his glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. That single word, both, represented everything he had spent his life fighting against. He took a large swallow of whiskey, then set the glass down with enough force to make the silverware rattle. "Father, I need to discuss some concerns about this inheritance arrangement," Victor began, his voice controlled but strained. "I have discovered some troubling information about Lila's financial activities." Lila's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What are you talking about?" "The bank transfers to Switzerland, the meetings with lawyers in 3 different countries, the encrypted communications with individuals whose backgrounds we have not verified." Victor's tone grew sharper with each accusation. "It appears my dear sister has been planning something quite elaborate." The color drained from Lila's face. "You have been monitoring my personal finances?" "I have been protecting family interests," Victor replied coldly, "something you clearly have no intention of doing." Silas watched this exchange with keen interest, saying nothing but observing everything. This was exactly the confrontation he had orchestrated, the final test to determine which child possessed the ruthless determination necessary to lead an empire. "Victor, you are completely wrong about this," Lila said, her voice beginning to shake. "I was trying to find a way to legally remove myself from the business. I do not want any part of the inheritance. I never have." "Lies." Victor slammed his palm on the table, causing glasses to jump. "You have been plotting to take control since the moment Father announced his retirement. You think your artistic pretensions and European lifestyle make you some kind of visionary leader. I want nothing from this family except my freedom." Lila shot back, standing from her chair. "I have been trying to escape your obsession with controlling every aspect of my life for years." Victor rose as well, his face flushed with rage and whiskey. "Obsession? I have been trying to protect you from your own stupidity. You are naive, irresponsible, and completely unfit to handle the responsibility Father wants to give you." "Then let me walk away," Lila screamed. "Let me sign whatever documents will remove me from everything and leave me alone." "You do not get to abandon this family when it becomes convenient," Victor snarled, moving around the table toward her. "You do not get to take half of everything I have earned and then disappear." Lila backed toward the stone fireplace, genuine fear replacing anger in her eyes. "Victor, you are scaring me. Please just let me leave." "You are not going anywhere until we settle this." Victor grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to leave bruises. Lila pulled back, trying to break free, but his grip tightened. "Let go of me," she cried, using her free hand to push against his chest. The struggle that followed lasted less than 2 minutes, but those 120 seconds would destroy everything the Hawthorne family had built over 4 generations. From the hallway outside the great room, Maria Torres had been approaching with coffee service when she heard the shouting. A 34-year-old mother of 3 who had worked at the ranch for 8 years, Maria had never witnessed violence between family members. She pressed herself against the wall, paralyzed by the escalating confrontation. Through the partially open doorway, Maria watched Victor shove Lila backward toward the fireplace. She saw Lila raise her hands to protect herself, saw the defensive scratches she left on Victor's forearms as she fought to escape. She witnessed Victor grab Lila by the shoulders and shake her violently before pushing her with enough force to send her stumbling backward. Lila's head struck the granite hearth with a sickening crack that echoed through the room even above the thunder outside. Her body crumpled to the floor, blood immediately pooling beneath her blonde hair. The great room fell completely silent, except for the storm raging beyond the windows. Victor stood frozen, staring down at his sister's motionless form. Silas remained seated at the dinner table, his expression unreadable. Maria Torres covered her mouth to prevent herself from crying out, tears streaming down her face as she realized she had just witnessed murder. This is where everything changed forever. If you are gripped by this story, hit that subscribe button because we are just getting to the most shocking part. 9:27 in the evening, Victor Hawthorne made the call that would define the rest of his life. "Marcus, I need you at the ranch immediately. There has been an accident." Marcus Bellamy had served as the Hawthorne family attorney for 23 years, handling everything from corporate mergers to personal scandals with the same cold efficiency. He understood that when clients with billions of dollars called about accidents, the situation required delicate management rather than emergency medical attention. Bellamy arrived at Yellowstone Ranch within 2 hours, accompanied by a team of specialists whose business cards listed vague titles like crisis management consultant and incident coordination specialist. By midnight, the ranch swarmed with private security personnel who began documenting the scene according to a very specific narrative. The official story was simple. Lila Hawthorne had argued with her brother about business matters, stormed away from the dinner table in anger, and tragically slipped on the stone floor while leaving the room. Her head struck the granite hearth, causing fatal brain trauma, a terrible accident amplified by family tensions and unfortunate timing. Sheriff Robert Clayton of Park County arrived at 1:15 in the morning. Clayton had held his position for 12 years, during which time the Hawthorne family had contributed generously to his re-election campaigns, the local police benevolent fund, and various community projects that enhanced his political reputation. Clayton spent 45 minutes at the scene, took minimal photographs, and accepted the family's explanation without requesting additional investigation. The county coroner, Dr. Patricia Wells, performed a cursory examination and agreed that the injuries were consistent with an accidental fall. By dawn, the death certificate listed the cause as accidental blunt force trauma to the head. Maria Torres watched this entire process unfold from her staff quarters, knowing that everything she witnessed contradicted the official account. The struggle between the siblings, Victor's violent shove, the deliberate nature of Lila's fatal impact with the fireplace, none of these details appeared in any report. But Maria Torres was a single mother working in rural Montana, supporting 3 children on a housekeeper's salary. The Hawthorne family employed half the county in various capacities. Speaking out meant losing her job, her home, and her ability to provide for her family, so she remained silent, carrying the burden of truth like a weight that grew heavier each day. For 6 months, the cover-up held. Victor inherited full control of Hawthorne Industries. Silas retreated from public life, and Lila Hawthorne was memorialized as a tragic figure whose promising artistic career was cut short by accident. But truth has a way of demanding justice, especially when it lives in the conscience of someone with moral courage. In February 2023, Maria Torres contacted investigative journalist Rebecca Chen at the Montana Standard. Chen had spent years exposing corruption in wealthy families, and she recognized the inconsistencies in the Hawthorne case immediately. Together, they built a compelling case. Security footage from exterior cameras showed no evidence of Layla slipping or falling accidentally. Blood spatter analysis revealed patterns consistent with violent impact rather than accidental contact. Most damaging of all, Maria's detailed testimony described the confrontation exactly as it occurred. The story broke on March 15, 2023, with the headline, "Witness claims billionaire heir murdered sister, sheriff covered it up." Within hours, the case exploded across national media. Cable news networks dispatched teams to Montana, social media platforms buzzed with outrage about wealthy families buying justice, and federal authorities announced they would review the investigation. The forensic evidence that Marcus Bellamy thought he had controlled told a devastating story. Defensive wounds on Lila's hands proved she had fought back. Bruising patterns on her arms matched Victor's grip strength. DNA evidence under her fingernails belonged to her brother, contradicting claims that no physical altercation occurred. The FBI reopened the case in April, treating it as potential homicide rather than accidental death. Victor's arrest came at his corporate headquarters on a Tuesday morning, with federal agents walking him out in handcuffs while news cameras captured every step. The mighty Hawthorne empire began collapsing within weeks. Corporate partners severed contracts, stock prices plummeted, and board members resigned rather than be associated with a murder scandal. Silas Hawthorne, once one of America's most powerful men, became a recluse whose family name was synonymous with corruption and violence. Maria Torres became the unlikely hero who brought down a dynasty built on lies. Her courage to speak truth to power proved that justice cannot be purchased permanently, only delayed temporarily. One woman's moral conviction dismantled a cover-up that involved lawyers, law enforcement, and millions of dollars in hush money. The David versus Goliath battle was won not through wealth or influence, but through the simple power of telling the truth. The trial of Victor Hawthorne began on September 11, 2023, in the federal courthouse in Billings, Montana. For 8 weeks, prosecutors methodically dismantled the carefully constructed fiction that had protected him for over a year. Maria Torres testified for 3 days, her voice steady as she described watching a billionaire murder his sister in cold blood. Forensic experts presented evidence that contradicted every element of the official accident narrative. Former ranch employees revealed years of Victor's increasingly obsessive behavior toward Lila, painting a clear picture of escalating psychological violence. The defense strategy centered on character assassination, attempting to portray Lila as a manipulative schemer who had provoked her brother beyond reason. But the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, blood analysis, witness testimony, and Victor's own surveillance records created an airtight case for premeditated murder. On November 3, 2023, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of second-degree murder. Victor Hawthorne, once heir to a billion-dollar empire, was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The man who had controlled every detail of his corporate kingdom now lived in an 8 by 10-foot cell at the Montana State Prison, where his wealth and family name carried no influence. Fellow inmates knew exactly who he was, and prison justice operated by different rules than boardroom politics. Silas Hawthorne never recovered from losing both his children in a single night of violence. Neighbors reported seeing the once powerful patriarch wandering his Connecticut estate in pajamas, talking to photographs of Victor and Lila as if they could respond. He was diagnosed with rapidly progressing dementia, though doctors debated whether the condition resulted from age or psychological trauma. The Hawthorne business empire collapsed with shocking speed. Legal fees, wrongful death settlements, and federal investigations drained corporate accounts. Stock prices fell 93%. The company filed for bankruptcy protection in January 2024, with assets sold to competitors who carved up the holdings like vultures feeding on carrion. Yellowstone Ranch became the subject of local folklore within months of the murder. Tour guides began including it in their ghost story presentations, claiming that Lila's spirit haunted the great room where she died. Ranch hands who still worked neighboring properties reported hearing a woman's voice calling for help on stormy nights, echoing across the valley where buffalo once grazed peacefully. The property remained unsold, too notorious for legitimate buyers and too expensive for curiosity seekers. Real estate agents stopped showing it after the third potential buyer fled during their walkthrough, claiming they felt overwhelming sadness in the great room where blood had stained stone floors. 4 generations of accumulated wealth, power and influence vanished in 18 months. The Hawthorne name, once spoken with respect in financial circles, became synonymous with family dysfunction, sibling murder, and the corruption that money could breed in human hearts. Victor Hawthorne had spent his entire life building an empire, only to watch it crumble because he could not accept that his sister deserved freedom more than he deserved control. The man who believed wealth could solve any problem discovered that some consequences cannot be purchased away. Justice had been served, not through expensive lawyers or political connections, but through the courage of one woman who refused to let truth be buried beneath lies and money. The Hawthorne tragedy teaches us profound lessons about the destructive power of toxic family dynamics and unchecked obsession. When parents pit their children against each other in competition for love and approval, they create psychological wounds that can fester for decades before exploding into violence. Victor Hawthorne's need for control began as childhood insecurity, but grew into something monstrous. His inability to accept that his sister deserved independence and autonomy ultimately cost both siblings their lives, one literally, the other through a lifetime prison sentence. This case demonstrates how obsession disguised as protection can become the most dangerous form of abuse. Money amplified every dysfunction within the Hawthorne family, rather than solving their problems. Wealth provided the resources for surveillance, manipulation, and cover-ups, but it could not purchase genuine love, emotional healing, or redemption after murder. The billions of dollars that were supposed to represent success became the very tools that enabled destruction. Perhaps the most powerful lesson comes from Maria Torres, whose moral courage proved that truth cannot be silenced forever. Despite facing potential job loss, social isolation, and threats from one of America's wealthiest families, she chose justice over personal security. Her decision to speak up reminds us that ordinary people can topple corrupt systems when they refuse to stay silent about wrongdoing. The Hawthorne case also reveals how privilege can insulate perpetrators from consequences, but only temporarily. Local law enforcement, expensive attorneys, and political connections delayed justice for months, but they could not prevent it entirely. The truth demanded recognition, and eventually, it received exactly that. For families struggling with similar dynamics on any economic level, this story offers a warning. Competition between siblings, conditional love from parents, and the belief that control equals care can poison relationships beyond repair. Healthy families celebrate individual differences rather than forcing conformity. They encourage independence rather than demanding dependence. Wealth without wisdom, power without compassion, and love without respect create the perfect conditions for tragedy. The Hawthornes had everything money could buy, but they lacked the emotional intelligence necessary to build genuine relationships based on mutual trust and unconditional acceptance. Victor Hawthorne believed he was protecting his sister, but he was actually destroying her. He thought he was preserving his family's legacy, but he was ensuring its complete annihilation. The Montana ranch where this tragedy occurred stands empty today, a monument to the truth that some mistakes cannot be undone and some consequences cannot be avoided, regardless of how much money you possess. What is the biggest lesson you are taking from the Hawthorne tragedy? Share your thoughts below. And if this story opened your eyes to the dark side of family wealth, make sure you are subscribed for more true crime that teaches real-life lessons.